People often say this with great confidence. God is just a human invention. It sounds clean. It sounds modern. It sounds like the conversation is already over. After all, humans invent things all the time. We invent tools. We invent stories. We invent explanations when we don't understand something. We invent meanings to cope with suffering. So why not God? But tonight, I want to do something unusual. I don't want to argue about God. I want to turn the question around. Because there is a deeper question hiding underneath that confident statement. Not, is God invented? But something far stranger. What would humans have to be if God were just an invention? Because inventing God is not like inventing fire, or language, or money. To invent God, not a local spirit, not a mythological creature, but God, requires a very specific kind of mind. A very unusual kind of consciousness. And once we slow down and examine that, the atheist explanation begins to feel incomplete. Not wrong. Not foolish. Just unfinished. The strongest version of the atheist claim. Let's begin by being completely fair. When people say, God is a human invention, they usually mean something reasonable, not something naive. The strongest version of the claim goes like this. Early humans lived in a dangerous, confusing world. They didn't understand lightning, disease, death, the movements of the stars, why suffering existed. So they created gods as explanations. Gods also served psychological and social functions, reducing fear of death, providing moral order, strengthening group cohesion, offering hope in suffering. Over time, these ideas evolved, became more abstract, more refined. Eventually, they crystallized into monotheism. In this view, God is not a monster or a lie. God is a projection. A meaningful one. A useful one. But still a projection. And as science advances, the need for that projection fades. This argument is not stupid. It's not shallow. In fact, many thoughtful atheists hold it. So we will not mock it. We will not strawman it. We will accept it for the sake of argument. Let's assume God really is an invention. The question is not whether that's comforting. The question is, what kind of beings must humans be to invent something like God at all? Inventing God is not like inventing myths. Here is where things get interesting. Because humans invent many things. But not all inventions are the same. Inventing a mythological creature is easy. A dragon is just a large animal, plus wings, plus fire. A unicorn is a horse, plus a horn. A superhero is a human, plus exaggerated powers. These are extensions of familiar categories. But God is not like that. God, in classical theism, is not a creature, an object, a force inside the universe, a powerful being among other beings. God is described as the ground of existence, the source of being, that which explains why anything exists at all, that which is not contingent, that which is not limited by time, space, or matter. This is not a mythological upgrade. This is a metaphysical concept. So if God is invented, humans didn't just invent a character. They invented the idea of necessary existence, absolute reality, ultimate explanation. Which raises a quiet but uncomfortable question. Why would a survival-driven species invent something that relativizes its own importance? Why invent a concept that says, you are not ultimate. You are not the center. You are accountable to something beyond yourself. From an evolutionary perspective, that's strange. Most survival mechanisms inflate the self. God does the opposite. The capacity problem. Let's slow down even further. To invent God, in the philosophical sense, humans must already possess certain cognitive capacities. Not learned later. Not borrowed from religion. Already there. Let's list just a few. 1. The capacity for the infinite. Humans can think about infinity, eternity, unlimited being. Not just symbolically, but conceptually. We can ask, Why is there something rather than nothing? That question does not help you hunt. It does not help you reproduce. It does not help you survive tomorrow. Yet humans ask it everywhere. If God is invented, the idea of infinity wasn't created by God belief. It existed before God belief could even be formed. So where did that come from? 2. The capacity for objective truth. Humans don't just want beliefs that work. They want beliefs that are true. We get angry at lies. Even when lies benefit us. We correct each other. Even when it costs us. If God is invented, humans already possessed a sense of truth as something binding. Truth as something we owe reality. But in a purely material universe, beliefs evolve for survival, not truth. Truth becomes accidental. And yet humans treat it as sacred. Why? 3. The capacity for moral obligation. Humans don't merely dislike harm. They condemn it. They say things like, "This should not have happened. This is wrong," even if everyone agrees. Even atheists do this. Especially atheists. If God is invented, then moral obligation, not just preference, existed before God belief. Which means morality is not explained by God belief. But then, why does morality feel binding at all? Why does it feel like something we answer to? Not something we negotiate? The strange mismatch. Now step back. If atheism is true, then at the deepest level, the universe is indifferent. Meaning is not built in. Values are emergent, not objective. Minds are the byproduct of blind processes. And yet humans act as if truth matters universally. Meaning is real. Injustice demands explanation. Reality ought to make sense. This creates a mismatch. Not a contradiction, but a tension. It's as if humans are overqualified for the universe they inhabit. As if their cognitive reach exceeds their ontological home. So again, the question returns. If God is just an invention, why does the human mind already look like it was built to ask God-sized questions? Not a God of the gaps. Let's be very clear. This is not a God of the gaps argument. We are not saying science can't explain X, therefore God. We are saying something more subtle. We are examining the assumptions that even the invention claim relies on. To say God is invented presupposes reason, truth, explanatory adequacy, rational evaluation. Those are not inventions. They are the tools used to judge inventions. So if God is invented, humans must already possess a rational structure capable of transcending instinct, evaluating reality, questioning existence itself. And that structure itself demands explanation. A quiet reversal. At this point, something strange happens. The claim, humans invented God, begins to flip. Instead of explaining religion, it exposes the mystery of the human mind. Because the more seriously we take the invention claim, the more extraordinary humans become. They are no longer just clever animals. They are beings who seek ultimate explanations, care about truth beyond utility, feel accountable to moral standards, refuse to accept a meaningless universe. So maybe the real question is not, did humans invent God? But, why are humans the kind of beings who cannot stop thinking in God-shaped categories? We promised not to force a conclusion. So we won't. But we will leave you with the question that remains. If God is merely a human invention, then the human mind itself is far stranger than we usually admit. Stranger than materialism predicts. Stranger than evolution alone explains. And maybe, just maybe, that strangeness is not an accident. Not proof. Just a question. One that refuses to go away. Evolution and the problem of cognitive overreach. At this point, many atheists will say, everything you've described can be explained by evolution. So let's take that seriously. Evolution, after all, is incredibly powerful. It explains why eyes see, why brains predict, why fear keeps us alive, why cooperation emerges. No honest discussion can ignore that. But evolution explains something very specific. What helps organisms survive and reproduce? Not what helps them grasp ultimate reality. And this is where a quiet problem appears. Because the human mind does not stop at survival-level questions. It doesn't ask only, where is food? Who is a threat? How do I stay alive today? It asks, why does anything exist at all? Is reality intelligible? Is truth binding even when it hurts? Is there something that grounds all meaning? From an evolutionary perspective, this looks like cognitive overreach. An organism evolved for local survival is suddenly obsessed with ultimate explanations. That's like evolving wings for short jumps and discovering you can leave the planet. The scale doesn't match. The overkill problem. Evolution favors efficiency. It does not waste energy on unnecessary capacities. So why would blind processes produce a mind that contemplates infinity, argues about objective morality, sacrifices survival for truth, cares about meaning even in the face of extinction? These are not marginal quirks. They define human history. If God is invented, then evolution produced a mind that constantly exceeds its own evolutionary job description. That's not impossible. But it is strange. Useful beliefs versus true beliefs. Here is another tension that rarely gets enough attention. Evolution selects for useful beliefs, not true beliefs. A belief can be false and still help you survive. For example, overestimating danger keeps you alive. Seeing agency where none exists can prevent risk. False confidence can improve reproductive success. So survival does not guarantee truth. Yet humans don't treat beliefs as mere tools. We distinguish sharply between what works and what is true. We criticize propaganda, even when it's effective. We condemn comforting lies. We admire people who choose truth at great personal cost. Why? If God is invented, then this devotion to truth must arise before belief in God. But truth-seeking beyond survival is evolutionarily risky. Truth can get you killed. And yet humans revere it. That is not an obvious evolutionary outcome. The hidden assumption. When someone says, God is invented, they are making a truth claim, not a survival claim. They assume. Their reasoning tracks reality. Their conclusions are more than just adaptive illusions. But evolution alone does not give you that guarantee. It gives you beliefs that work, not beliefs that correspond. So the invention claim quietly assumes a rational order that evolution cannot itself secure. That assumption didn't come from science. It came from somewhere else. The projection theory turns inward. Let's talk about projection. The classic atheist explanation says, humans project their fears, hopes, and values onto the universe, and call that projection, God. But projection works by exaggerating what already exists. You project strength because you know strength. You project justice because you already recognize injustice. You project meaning because you already experience meaning as real. Projection does not create concepts out of nothing. It presupposes them. So if God is a projection of moral authority, absolute truth, ultimate reality, then humans already possessed those categories prior to God belief. Which means God belief did not create them. It inherited them. And now the projection theory turns inward. Where did those categories come from? If they are illusions, why do they bind us so deeply? If they are inventions, why do we treat them as obligations rather than preferences? Why humans don't act like nihilists? Here's an uncomfortable observation. Almost no one lives as if meaning is unreal. Morality is optional. Truth is arbitrary. Even those who say they believe this do not act accordingly. They protest injustice. They demand accountability. They appeal to reason. They get angry when lied to. They act as if the universe owes them intelligibility. Suffering demands explanation. Actions matter beyond immediate outcomes. This is not hypocrisy. It's something deeper. It suggests that humans are structured to live as if meaning is real, even when their theories deny it. So if God is invented, then humans are beings whose deepest intuitions systematically exceed their worldview. That's not trivial. That's philosophically explosive. The cost of the invention claim. At this stage, the invention claim begins to extract a price. To maintain it consistently, one must accept that our sense of truth is a byproduct, not a guide. Our moral outrage has no objective anchor. Our longing for meaning is a cognitive side effect. Our reasoning faculties evolved without regard for ultimate reality. In other words, we are radically misaligned with the universe we inhabit. Our minds insist on questions the universe cannot answer. Our values demand foundations the universe does not supply. Our reason reaches for absolutes in a reality without any. This does not disprove atheism, but it reveals its cost. A strange possibility. Now consider an alternative possibility. Not a conclusion, just a possibility. What if humans are not inventing God so much as recognizing something their minds are already oriented toward? What if God belief persists? Not because humans are ignorant, but because they are too rational to ignore certain questions? That doesn't mean God exists. But it does mean the invention story may be incomplete. It explains religion psychologically, but leaves human rationality metaphysically unexplained. And that gap matters. The inversion complete. We began with a simple claim. God is just a human invention. But after taking it seriously, something unexpected happens. The claim no longer diminishes God. It magnifies humans. They become beings who grasp infinity, demand truth, intuit moral obligation, refuse nihilism, seek ultimate explanation. And now a final question emerges. Is it really simpler to explain God away? Or have we made the human mind inexplicably strange? Where this leaves us. In the next part, we will not argue that God exists. Instead, we will ask something even more uncomfortable. If God is invented, why does the concept of God look less like a myth, and more like a philosophical necessity? Not proof, but pressure. Quiet pressure. Why God concepts converge across cultures. At this point, a careful atheist might respond. Yes, humans ask big questions. But they answer them differently. God concepts vary wildly across cultures. That proves invention. At first glance, that sounds persuasive. But variation is not the whole story. Because beneath the surface diversity, something strange happens. Across cultures, eras, and civilizations, God concepts converge in structure. Not in stories. Not in rituals. But in function. Wherever humans ask ultimate questions, the answer takes on remarkably similar roles. God is that which explains why anything exists. That which grounds moral obligation. That which stands beyond contingency. That which is not dependent on the universe. Even polytheistic systems often preserve a highest principle. The One. The Absolute. The Tao. Brahman. The Good. This is not mythological creativity. This is philosophical convergence. So if God is invented, then humans across cultures independently invent the same metaphysical role. That's not how arbitrary inventions behave. Why this matters? People invent many things independently. Tools. Weapons. Social customs. But they don't independently invent the same ultimate explanation unless they are responding to the same structural pressure. Different roads, same destination. Which suggests the pressure is not cultural. It's cognitive. And that brings us back to the human mind. Necessity is not a psychological need. One common explanation says, humans invented God because they needed comfort. But comfort alone does not generate the concept of necessity. A comforting story could say, the universe will be okay. You'll survive somehow. But God is not defined as comforting. God is defined as necessary. Meaning, God cannot fail to exist. God does not depend on anything else. God is not one option among others. That concept is deeply unintuitive. It does not arise from fear. Fear wants reassurance. Necessity demands explanation. So if God is invented, humans invented a concept that resists imagination, violates instinct, demands logical coherence. That's not psychology. That's metaphysics. Why reason demands ultimate explanation. Let's confront a deeper issue. Human reason is restless. It does not stop easily. When given an explanation, it asks, why that? And then, why that? And then, why anything at all? This is not cultural conditioning. Children do it spontaneously. Philosophers do it relentlessly. Scientists do it methodologically. Reason seeks sufficient explanation. And eventually, it reaches a limit. At that limit, reason does not ask for another cause within the universe. It asks for the ground of the universe. That question is not religious by default. It is rational by nature. So if God is invented, humans did not invent God to stop reasoning. They invented God because reasoning refused to stop. The unavoidable question. You can reject God. You can redefine God. But you cannot eliminate the question. Why is there something rather than nothing? Atheism does not dissolve that question. It inherits it. And then struggles with it. Why, brute fact, is not a neutral answer. At this point, some atheists say, the universe is just a brute fact. No explanation needed. But that response reveals something important. Calling something a brute fact is not an explanation. It's a refusal of explanation. And refusing explanation is not neutral. It is a philosophical move. One that suspends the very rational demand that science and reason rely on everywhere else. We don't accept brute facts lightly. We accept them only when explanation fails. So if the universe is declared brute by default, reason has been curtailed, not completed. Which raises another question. Why does human reason demand explanation at all, if reality ultimately has none? Why are we built to ask questions the universe cannot answer? Again, the mismatch returns. Atheism's quiet dependence on theological structure. Here is a subtle irony. Modern atheism often rejects God. While preserving God's job description, it still believes in universal truth, moral accountability, rational order, intelligible reality. These are not accidental beliefs. They historically arose within a worldview that saw reality as grounded in reason. So when atheism keeps these commitments, but removes the ground, it inherits the structure without the foundation. This is not hypocrisy. It's inheritance. And inheritance raises questions. The human mind is a clue, not a proof. Let's pause again. Nothing we've said proves God exists. That is not the goal. What we are doing is something quieter. We are noticing that the human mind asks unavoidable questions. Those questions generate convergent answers. Those answers take on a God-like structure. Denying God does not remove the structure. So perhaps the human mind itself is a clue. Not evidence. Not proof. A clue. Pointing not outward, but inward. A final pressure point. So we return to our original reversal. If God is merely an invention, then humans must be beings who generate metaphysical necessity, demand ultimate explanation, intuit moral obligation, trust reason beyond survival, refuse brute meaninglessness. That is an extraordinary list. And now the final tension sharpens. Which is more plausible? That humans accidentally evolved all these God-oriented capacities in a universe that does not answer them, or that these capacities correspond, however imperfectly, to something real? We are not answering. We are only asking. What remains unresolved? In the final part, we will step back and look at the whole picture. Not to conclude, but to ask one last question. Is the idea of God really an invention? Or is it the shadow cast by reason when it looks for its own foundation? Conclusion. The question beneath the question. We began with a statement that sounds simple. God is just a human invention. It sounds like an ending. Like the kind of sentence that closes a discussion. But when we slowed down, something unexpected happened. The sentence stopped talking about God and started talking about us. Because inventing God is not a small act. It is not like inventing a myth, or a ritual, or a comforting story. To invent God, in the sense people actually mean, requires a kind of mind that is already doing something very strange. A mind that asks questions it doesn't need to ask. A mind that refuses to stop at usefulness. A mind that demands truth even when truth hurts. A mind that feels morally bound, not merely conditioned. A mind that looks at the universe and asks not just how it works, but why it exists at all. So the original claim quietly transforms. It no longer sounds like God is just a human invention. It starts to sound like humans are the kind of beings who cannot avoid God-shaped questions. And that is a very different claim. The strange dignity of the human mind. If God is invented, then the human mind is astonishing. Not merely clever. Not merely adaptive. But almost misplaced in the universe. It reaches beyond survival. Beyond instinct. Beyond local explanations. It insists that reality be intelligible. It insists that injustice be more than unfortunate. It insists that truth be binding, not optional. It insists that meaning matter, even if the universe goes silent. That insistence is not neutral. It is not obvious. It is not demanded by atoms or evolution alone. And yet it is everywhere. Across cultures. Across centuries. Across belief systems. Even among those who deny God most forcefully. What atheism does, and doesn't, remove. Rejecting God does many things. It removes a particular explanation. It challenges inherited beliefs. It forces intellectual honesty. But it does not remove the demand for truth, the hunger for explanation, the sense of moral obligation, the refusal to accept brute meaninglessness. Those remain. They don't disappear. They simply become harder to explain. Atheism can reject God, but it still wakes up each day inside a mind that behaves as if reality is answerable. And that fact deserves reflection. Not a proof, but pressure. Nothing here proves God exists. That was never the goal. What we've done instead is apply pressure. Pressure to an assumption many people hold without examining. That saying, God is invented, makes the world simpler. It may simplify theology, but it complicates anthropology. Because now we must explain a species that invents metaphysical necessity, lives by objective moral language, trusts reason beyond survival, feels accountable to standards it did not create, cannot stop asking ultimate questions. That is not a small explanatory burden. The final reversal. So we end where we began, but facing the other direction. Perhaps the real mystery is not, why do humans invent God? But, why does the human mind look like it was built to recognize something beyond itself, even when it denies it exists? You don't have to answer that. You don't even have to like the question. But once you've seen it, it's very hard to unsee. And maybe that's the point. Final line, leaving the question open. If God is just an invention, then humans are far stranger than we usually admit. And if humans are that strange, then perhaps the universe is not as silent as we assume. Not proven. Not settled. Just worth thinking about.